But for the fourth straight night, protests are happening across the country in cities big and small. Some protesters turning violent, attacking police. It's a sign of just how divided our country remains, as you saw earlier in our poll numbers. And ABC's Jim Avila has more on the election fallout. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Paula. This morning, more evidence that not everyone is ready to accept the results of election 2016. Thousands of Hispanics, gays, and others take to the streets to protest Donald Trump's election. And on the internet, it's some Trump supporters lashing out. Overnight, a fourth night of violent protests in Portland, Oregon. Thousands of demonstrators clashing with police, spraying tear gas to clear the streets. The chaotic scene unfolding as demonstrations were carried out from coast to coast in front of the president-elect's Manhattan Tower. To Los Angeles, where an estimated 10,000 people marched through the streets.
This is a very multicultural, diverse country. We can't have somebody who stands against that as the head of the government.
And parts in between, like Indianapolis, home state of the vice president-elect, where a protest of 500 in front of the state capitol began peacefully, but ended with some hauled away in handcuffs.
When there is violence, we have to take action. That is our responsibility as a police department.
Stop Trump now!
Hundreds arrested this weekend nationwide as anti-Trump protesters react to Trump's election and the racism that has accompanied it. The Southern Poverty Law Center saying there have been more than 200 reports of hate-based intimidation and harassment since Election Day on college campuses in Michigan, Massachusetts, New York, and that's not all. At the University of Oklahoma and the University of Pennsylvania, an investigation into a violent racist group chat aimed at African-American students. The FBI brought in to investigate. Penn student Nadia Browning was one of the targets.
I wasn't surprised by the hate that was coming my way, but it really hurt because in my lifetime, I've never experienced anything like this before.
Some Trump supporters on campus embarrassed by what's going on.
We all come together, regardless of who we voted for, and we make it clear that these things aren't acceptable.
Yeah, here in Los Angeles, most of the protesters on the street have been peaceful, at least yesterday. But across the country, that has not always been the case. Dan and Paula?
No, it has not. Jim, thank you. As promised, we have ABC News chief anchor George Stephanopoulos right here with us. George is going to be hosting This Week later this morning. So many things to talk about here. But let's start with this choice of chief of staff. What is this going to tell us about how Trump intends to govern?
You know, Trump had so many different kinds of promises, some that were in keeping with the Republican establishment, some that were taking on the Republican establishment. It's being played out in this choice of chief of staff, if indeed the choice is between Reince Priebus, the RNC chair, a close ally of the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, or Steve Bannon, the head of Breitbart, who was taking on Paul Ryan every single day as the head of Breitbart. So I think what Trump may try to do is find a way to thread the needle and give them both serious positions inside the White House. But that chief of staff is the most critical role in the White House, no question about it.
A lot of eyebrows being raised as Trump continues his transition. An interesting name that's being floated out there right now for key advisor is President Obama. He's even said that he would consider Bill Clinton's counsel. Are you buying that?
Well, I think he'll call on former presidents. I think there's no question about that. Whether he'll be taking a lot of policy counsel from President Obama, I think that's a little bit tougher to swallow, given the fact that so much of what Donald Trump has said he would do is undo many of President Obama's executive orders in the first day. But we did see a clue. You know, Donald Trump talking about health care this week said President Obama advised him to keep the idea that if you have a pre-existing condition, you can buy health insurance and kids can stay on their parents' insurance plan up until the age of 26. Whether that's possible or not, if you're dismantling Obamacare, is a separate question. But he certainly sort of deferred in that direction.
Let's talk about Hillary Clinton. Now, we're hearing from her really for the first time in a substantive way since she conceded. She got on a conference call and blamed her loss largely on James Comey, the head of the FBI, who came out at the 11th hour and said he was going to take another look at her emails. Some people are angered by this, saying that she needs to take more personal responsibility. Do you think it's fair of her to blame Comey?
Well, I think if you look at what was happening in this election, she had a lot of momentum coming out of the third debate. That stalled when that letter came out from Jim Comey, and you know, you had the second letter 10 days later. Listen, when you only have 112,000 votes in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin separating a win from a loss, every little bit does matter. But there were also big forces at work here, and there's no question about that.
We've talked about protests the fourth straight night, and some of these protests are turning violent. Upon whom is the onus to really urge calm? Is it on Obama? Is it on Hillary Clinton? Or is it on Trump?
It's on all three, I think. And you've seen all of them say the right words coming out of the election. Donald Trump coming right out on early Wednesday morning saying he was hoping to bind the wounds. President Obama saying we have to wish him success as president. And Hillary Clinton doing the same with her gracious concession speech on Wednesday. But, you know, this kind of anger and fear is not going to go. We haven't seen it, these kind of protests in more than 100 years. In the United States following a presidential election. It's not going to go away easily, but I think all three of them do bear some responsibility and are taking it.
We are in interesting, intense times in America. George Stephanopoulos, thank you very much. And a reminder, George has a big show this morning. He's going to be speaking with Rudy Giuliani, the vice chair of the Trump presidential transition team.
He'll also speak with Keith Ellison, co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, about what's next for the Democratic Party. That's coming up later this morning on This Week, a busy morning right here on ABC.